The Math Map Book Club, where ordinary parents encourage one another to develop an extraordinary appreciation of math. We love what we know and struggle over the unfamiliar. Through weekly conversation and exploration among friends, we can begin to enjoy ideas that seem difficult. Join our book club as we discover how math helps us to know God and to make Him known.
Hey, I'm Leigh Bortons, and it's Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025. Welcome to the Math Map Book Club, where Kirsty Gilpin and I discuss lessons each week from our math curriculum for families with students enrolled in classical conversations communities. This academic year, our club's working on a lesson a week together as we prepare to answer our children's questions. But today we're going to end with a strong finish, and instead of answering questions, we're going to have a lot of testimonies and kind of reflections and look back on how the year went, because this is our last round of 30 weeks. So Kirsty, take it over.
All right. I guess it's true. You really can't multitask. I can't share my screen and talk at the same time effectively. So hi, everybody. It is our last week for this go around. We're looking at lesson 30, which is entitled Reflection, and it is designed to be one of our Blue Book assessment weeks. And so just to review, in lesson 15, let me pull up our math map. In lesson 15, we called it assessment. And I like to think of assessment as being that course correction. So mid-year, what's going well, what could be better, and maybe how do we course correct to meet the objectives we have for the year. Whereas at the end of the year, while we still want to assess and think about next year, we also want to really emphasize that idea of reflecting back and seeing what we accomplished and celebrating that over the course of our time together in that Blue Book time. So this is lesson 30, reflection. And again, we are working through this using the complex lessons, but it's interesting, especially this week, because you're going to see that those booklets for all of the domains are very, very similar. The lines and the spacing are a little bit bigger for the younger grades, while they're a little bit smaller for the older grades, but they have the same structure, the same blank pages. And you may be wondering at home, why does my third grader or my 5-year-old need Blue Book? It may not be for them to fill. It may be something that you fill with some things that you can celebrate with your student, or some notes that you take, or perhaps you use that to draw pictures. There's a lot of ideas in charts 15 and 30 for how you can use those pages. So I just want to encourage us all, no matter how old our students are, and no matter which domain we're working in, this is an important week. Our last week for games is, again, working through quick flip arithmetic. And I thought I would just share with you what I think of as perhaps the penultimate or the ultimate algebra exercise that you could use with quick flip arithmetic. And so if we think a little bit about the distributive property, and I'm wondering if I kept the wrong slide. Is this what, can somebody remember, is this what we talked about last week? It is.
Yes.
So
Yes.
So what I'm going to do, because I have here the wrong slide that I kept, so I am going to see if I can fix this on the fly, and I'm just going to show you by writing what I intended. And I apologize for that. I had it written out and then I kept the wrong slide. So this is why I mean for this to be in reverse, is because now let's say that I flip over 2 cards. And I'm going to actually work my way. You know what? I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to say that because whatever I say, I know that I'm going to mess up what I wanted to say. And so let's just talk about the fact that we can use quick flip arithmetic, this game that Leigh designed several years ago now. Leigh, I was just thinking about the fact that it's over 10 years since that mandala group finished. Um, and what a celebration that Leigh worked with these young adults for a year. And one of the things that they produced was quick flip arithmetic. And that was their way of demonstrating the things that they knew about math, right? That they had spent this year really working diligently with Leigh to go through and examine math. And especially, I think you were looking at a lot of things from a quadrivium perspective with those students. And they came up with two things. They had the quick flip arithmetic and national number knockout were two things that they did. And so as you look at quick flip arithmetic with perhaps your oldest students or your most experienced students, perhaps challenge them to come up with games that they could play, right? So how could they take this idea of the distributive property and change up the game? And that will really take that student who thinks that they know what they're doing and really challenge them in a new way to put that knowledge together in order to teach somebody else or to demonstrate their understanding in a new way. So I just thought I would share that here since I had the wrong slide and I don't want to mess up. But what a great way when we're talking about assessment and reflection to really encourage those students to take that next step, right? That's what it would really be to be rhetorical, is how could I use a game to teach somebody else about the distributive property?
Well, and that's another way they can use their week 29 book is to make up math games and write them and write the instructions in there.
That would be really fun over time to have a whole set of games. So let's take a few minutes to take a look at our cover here. And we're not going to spend our full 10 minutes. That's why I took our timer off because I wanted to make sure we had time for people to share today. And so, but if you had some things you'd like to share as we look at the thinker or at our quotation or our reflection, please go ahead and share what you see there.
One thing I think about the sculptor is how he had to see beyond the basic three-dimensional shapes that comprise this body, all of the spheres and the octahedrons and the various shapes like that in order to make just the detail come out like it has.
This is a fun fact that actually in Paris and I saw the sculpture and it's smaller, just like the Stonehenge in England, it's smaller. And the Mona Lisa is smaller than we thought it would be. It's a metaphor for our math problem is actually smaller than we think.
It's good.
I think this is very convicting because I think we don't always do this, like think this deeply anymore, especially with, technology and social media and everything that's out there as a distraction. So it's very convicting to just kind of stare at this and think, how often do I really spend time doing that, thinking deeply?
I really like the reflection, the one that's italicized. I think that sums up so much how I feel and probably how others feel after having this experience, that we are grateful and that this thinker helps us to stop and ponder our gratefulness, stop and ponder how to be calm and how to share what we have learned.
I want to add to that because you see who wrote it. It's from our Sherry Swigert, who's helping us to write the math map. And lead so much of classical conversations curriculum. And like on week 4, we have Kirsty Gilpin's daughter's artwork. And on one of the weeks, we have one of our director's photographs that she took. And that even though we have all this classical literature or classical art that people would consider old or classical, we know that classical is timeless. And so Sherry has as much wisdom to offer as Aristotle after having raised 4 wonderful children, probably more than he had to offer. And that's what I think about each one of you, that classical education allows both the timely and the timeless to be part of the conversation. So the thinking is really important, but so is our Sherry's thoughts and each of your thoughts. So thank you.
Leigh, I like that reminder about classical education and Babs, that idea to think, right? Even about the exercises before us, that a classicalist might say it's better to think deeply about 1 or 2 exercises than it is to complete pages of drill. Not that the drill doesn't matter, right? We encourage the flashcards, we encourage that drill to really add information to our memoria, but that it is as important to think deeply about the exercises. And so I know we have a lot of families who didn't get through every page of the booklet, or their students didn't get through 4 pages a day, and encouraging them that it's okay, that if you have a student who's sitting there and thinking and working through, that is as important as it is to get through and do as much as you can, right? That there's a good balance there. All right, so
I think I
let's,
should just maybe tell folks too, before you go on, why it says at the bottom about the signature. This is my work done solely for the glory of the Lord. And as we enter a time when universities are building Faraday rooms because children cheat on their exams using electronic devices, we know that our students can be taught the ethics and the integrity and the responsibility of being their own king and governing themselves. And so this is just one more reminder for our students even, that we think a whole lot of them, and it's not just some rote thing to sign, that it's serious, and to reflect upon it.
it's a really important, and we shouldn't need to say that, but I think it is important that when we think about a classical Christian education, that we're educating for character as well as for knowledge. So there are no I squared, I cubed pages this week, but we do have charts. And as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, the charts for lesson 15 and lesson 30 have a lot of information and a lot of ideas for how you might assess your students in different ways at different developmental stages in different domains. But especially in our first year, maybe our first couple of years, I'm going to first get on my soapbox and then encourage you that we can simplify our assessment. And so my soapbox is, let's read Matthew 6:33 together. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. And so my soapbox is this, that when we are seeking to know God through mathematics, all the other stuff will come with that. We're going to learn to read mathematics. We're going to learn to calculate. We're going to learn to translate between words and symbols. We're going to learn to graph or calculate areas. All of those skills that we might think of as the mathematical skills, if we're seeking to know God through math, we're going to have to learn those to get there. But it reminds me of when I first moved to Seven Lakes, and Leigh was still a director, and she very kindly had an information meeting at her house. And so there was a room full of parents and a room full of kids. And one of the things that she said has really stuck with me. And she talks about her early days of homeschooling and the emphasis that they all had, in the homeschooling community to really prove that homeschooling was legitimate. And there was a goal to get your children into college because that really demonstrated that what you did was legitimate. And they weren't just doing that for themselves, they were doing it for those of us who came after, because they were on that vanguard of proving to everybody that homeschooling was legitimate, that those kids were educated as well or better than kids in traditional schools, that they could go to college and do all of those things. And so in the early days of homeschooling, there was this emphasis on college. And I remember her saying, though, that she then she and Rob had an awareness or an epiphany, I'm not sure what the right word would be, that what they needed to do was not educate their sons for college, they needed to educate their sons for Christ. And when we educate our children for Christ, he's going to put our children where they need to be. And if that's college, they're going to be in college, right? That shooting for Christ is a much higher goal than college. And so I think when we take that and we apply it to math, right? When we're seeking to know God through math, that's a much higher goal than becoming great calculators or being able to read math or going to college for math, right? Those are all much lesser goals than knowing God. And so I really am so thankful that I have the opportunity to work with Leigh and to work here on a product that we are emphasizing to all of you, right? That the most important thing that we can do is help our children to discover God through mathematics, and everything else will come. And so if you're stressed at assessment time about how well your kids can add and subtract or solve an algebra problem, I just want to encourage all of us to put that into perspective and say, oh, wow, but look at how we got to know God more this year. And if we keep pursuing that, all of these other things are going to come. Jesus said it. And if he said it, I believe it. So now let's talk about, once we've talked that big goal, and that was really what we were talking about last week with lesson 29, the Seeing the Unseen booklet. What do we think about? How do we assess the mathematics? And we can be traditional and we can pull exercises out and we can give those to our students and say, can you do these? But especially this first year, I really want to encourage us that it's also okay to broaden our view and look a little bit wider than just those specific skills and think about what really does 1 year in the math map help us to do? Well, hopefully it helps your student to see that there is actually a map of mathematics that helps us to see how all of those ideas are integrated and work together, that we're not all of these disjointed lessons, but it is part of a cohesive whole. So you could ask them, what do you know about each dimension? Can they tell you what the dimensions were that you studied? Can they tell you anything about those dimensions? So that's a really broad question that gets to the heart of the structure of the math map and the heart of the structure of mathematics. Then you could ask them, what do you know about your domain? So if you were in complex, what do they know about complex numbers? Guess what? That includes real numbers and rational numbers, and it includes irrational numbers. It includes integers and naturals. So we can have a really robust conversation just talking about what makes up complex numbers. For our younger students, right, what is a fraction? What's a decimal? What do these things look like? And so just asking them what they know about the domain that they were working in all year. There are two other things you might want to assess. You might want to assess their computation. And we've talked all year about one of the best ways to assess computation is through games. So whether that's quick flip arithmetic, whether that's N2K, or some other computation game that your family has discovered and likes to play, right? That's a lot more fun, and you're going to be able to assess how well your student is computing both their speed and their accuracy through games. The other thing that we want to assess, because we keep talking about the language of mathematics, is how well are they learning that language? So I would just encourage you to open up to any of the charts, or open up to any of the lesson pages or any of the I pages, and just say, let's read some of this. What do you notice? What symbols do you know? Right? And so can you start to read the mathematics? And that's a great way to assess. So that may seem very simplistic this year when we talk about blue books and assessment, but I think that would really help you to see how much you have grown and how much your student has grown. Does anybody have any questions about assessment before we move on?
Yes, so that sounds great for our students at home, but as a Challenge A tutor, how would I do that in class?
So you could still ask them, right? What do you know about each dimension? What do you know about your domain?
Yes.
But I would also encourage you to go and look in the charts. We do have sample exercises that you might use in the charts. You know that a lot of, and we can open this up for others to share, that people like to ask about the art. What was your favorite piece of art that we discussed this year? What did you like about it? How did it help you learn something about math? So I would draw on things that you've experienced together as a class and ask them to reflect on that. But I'll pause, and I know that we've got some directors on our call that may have some great feedback for you.
I have a question. So one of the mamas, they have younger kids, and as I was conducting these workshops, they were asking, where do you teach long divisions? So I assume it's going to be somewhere, if you look at the map, it's going to be somewhere in the upper 1/3, kind of in the integer decimal domains booklet 5, which is multiplication division. Is that true? Like, because I think they were stuck in the traditional ways that, well, we got to get out a whiteboard and teach the steps of long divisions, and they couldn't see it past the booklet 2. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, if they're in naturals, there's not gonna be long division. It's just simple division. It's not, like you were right, it's not until they're in the even integers, there's no long division. It's not until they get to decimals.
And then same thing with word problems, because Singapore math has a lot of word problems, so a lot of applications. And where do we see that?
So it depends what you think a word problem is in your definition. I think reading the instructions is the first word problem. They all need to practice, and there's instructions all over the place because very oftentimes they don't know what to do because they didn't read the instructions. So that's the one place. And then once you start hitting one, decimals has word problems. So if you look through the tops where it says words, symbols, and images, you'll start seeing in lessons 3 through 8 more word problems at the tops, and then there's some across the bottom. But people, I think, get too enamored with the word problems when they can't even read they don't even know what the words in the word problem mean. And so we practice that a lot more until we get into complex.
Yes, that's true. Thank you for that reminder.
They're all words. And that's the thing. So when you ask that question, it's a good question. They want to know where are those word problems and they're thinking problems. But what we found is with traditional math education, or maybe modern math education, when they go, they don't spend enough time learning the language. They expect the children to translate the Latin before they even learn what Latin is and what the words are. So we don't want to make that mistake in math.
I have a
Kind of to
question.
piggyback on that, one of the things that I've experienced this year is in a previous math curriculum, I was waiting for what the book said. Here's all the things and here's how to teach it. And what I have found is just using the flashcards has given me a language to be able to teach my son those things. So, we've gotten so far behind on the curriculum that we had because we had to finish all the pages. And I realized we never got to division. And so we actually we were looking at a division problem in the fraction booklet, and he had no idea how to do it. But I was able to use words like dividend and numerator and denominator, and it all clicked for him, because now we had this common language. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that that's kind of where I've found the math map is actually giving me back the confidence and ability to teach my child, which is my job.
Yeah, people really want to overlook the games and the flashcards, but if you're at the grammar stage of anything, that playing and building your vocabulary is always where you have to begin, instead of just rushing ahead to the calculations, because the calculations will get easier if they've got those grammatical facts down and they know what the question is asking them. So when, we've written a problem that says, tell me the root of this quadratic equation, and you don't know what a root is, an equation or quadratic, you fall apart. So we spend more time on that in the early years than most curriculums do. Let me give you an analogy that just stuck with me all this time. Is I'm going back to Africa next week in order to do a practicum there. And the last time I was in Africa, the parents were asking me to please delay challenge A until the students were 13, because since they learned 2 languages, they wanted extra time in their mother tongue before they started diving into the harder courses that were in English, which wasn't their mother tongue. Well, here's the thing, gang. Mathematics is none of our mother tongue. We need to give our children the time to build the language, and people who don't speak 2 languages don't seem to know that. So it seems to be an American issue. Other countries don't seem quite as pressed to have their little ones do as much hard work, as much as better work.
Wow, that's really good. So I have a question, but before I ask it, I noticed that Dr. Kirsty was, I think she was hoping that other Challenge A directors or tutors might give some ideas about assessment, and I'm eager to hear if there's anyone who has any suggestions before I ask my question.
That's good.
So I know that Jill and Babs have both put quite a bit in the chat. So if you haven't looked at the chat, they've put a lot of ideas there. So I would definitely go and check that out.
A lot of what we did was kind of the same thing we did for 15. We're asking them to, like, I bring out all my books and they pick the art that was their favorite, and I'll ask them where they saw God and where they saw math. And one thing I put in the chat was this year my kids have really been excited about the flashcards, because I give rubber bands when they memorize things from the flashcards. And when our jar is full, we get cookout milkshakes, which is one of their favorite things. And so I think they want me to drill them on the flashcards this year as part of the blue book, which I'm happy to do because that would be really easy. Just show them the flashcards and let them tell me the answers. Or we could let them write down in our reflection booklet symbols that they know and what definitions they remember. And one thing we've kind of talked about, we talked about this last week in my class, was that some of these definitions, sometimes there's 4 possible definitions. And so they could just memorize one, or they could challenge themselves to memorize more than one, really just depending on their level. And so I think letting them draw the symbol and then remember as much as you can about how that symbol is related to what you're studying is also something.
I want to remind you, there's a lot of questions in week 15 charts for your blue books. Go back to that. But something I don't think we've ever said is go back to book 1. Right, just like we do capstones or clinchers with all our writing, we should be doing clinchers with our mathematics. And so go look at book 1 and say to the students, there's going to be one question from book 1. Well, that'll make them look through book 1, and there's only 16 problems in book 1, so there's not a huge amount, and most of them are fairly simplistic problems. So that's a place where you could get a couple of actual physical problems for them to do some calculations on. And that will tell them that next year, maybe before they start, they should go look at book 1 before they start the math map.
That's good. That's good.
I agree. And I think that sometimes students don't know what they want to write about. And so pointing to the charts where there are questions listed and saying, choose one of these questions to answer. That way they don't have to, they can scroll, not scroll, but skim through and think, oh yeah, I have something to say about that. And I like to have the books available to them. I don't say hide them and do your assessment without them, because it's not going to tell them anything they didn't already know. And it might prompt something that, that they remember that they've done. And sometimes I'll write ideas on the board too. Like, we've talked a lot about the distributive property this year. Do you have thoughts about that? And I'll write that down as a prompt, an idea, or where have you seen inverses, or where have you seen trinities, or those kinds of things. And they might not choose to answer any of those, but it gets them thinking. And then I've also pretty much in all my blue books always said, is there a question I didn't ask, but you feel passionate about, that you learned this year, that showed you God or showed you something that has changed you that you wish I had asked? Write it, answer that too.
That's great.
And if you're looking for straight math problems, another thing you could do is take maybe week 2's careful calculation page and put some of those problems on the board for them to solve. And then if you look at the week 20, I can't remember if it's 28 or 29's careful calculation is a summation of the whole year with samples of math problems from 15 different lessons. You could take those and you could just even take that careful calculation and say, this is gonna be your blue book, but I want to see all the steps.
And you said weeks 28 and 29?
I can't remember which one it is. It's 28 or 29.
Okay.
I think it might be 28. Yeah, it's 28.
Okay.
Kind of related to what Leigh said about book 1, I've been telling parents to go back to book 1 right now because we're at the end. And whereas we were telling parents at the beginning of the year, let's just focus on the tops of booklet 1 because that tells you how to use the curriculum. It's brand new. But the middle part is the part where they can dig deeper. So I've been telling parents, okay, now that you're at the end, go back to booklet 1 and see if you can have any of these conversations with your kids now at the end of the year. And that's kind of, part of assessment as well.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Well, my actual question is, I was having a conversation with my Challenge 8 daughter about a week ago about the math map, and I won't get into all of the pieces of it, but one of the things that she said was, I don't feel like I learned any math this year. And I was stunned because I was like, but you're doing the math map, and she's the only Challenge 8 student in her class who is doing, out of 9, there are 9 students in her class. She's the only one who's doing the math map at home. And so I'm writing down all these notes about assessment, but I wanted to mention that and ask for feedback about how can I help her see what she's learned, because she doesn't see, like, she can't do the calculations on careful calculations, but she can read the problems. And so I think a lot of these suggestions kind of answer that. But like I'm looking for an assessment that is both satisfactory to my husband, who's like, I need to see that she's doing the math, right? And me, of course. And then also helps her to see how much she's actually learned. That's real math. Like, she just doesn't see it as real math. She's like, Mom, I'm going through it and I see the patterns. She's one of those kids who's like, I'm just looking at the patterns and I fill it in based on what, like, I don't need to know why. I'm just finishing the work. I'm just checking it off. And
So maybe looking at the essentials might give some experience for that. So what you're describing, Nicole, is exactly what she was supposed to be doing. So if the first year through, you just learn what's in the math map, can I read it? Where are things? Have some situational awareness to how the books are put together. Do some of the games, some of the flashcards. Great, because the next year's is going to be super similar. And now it's time to go and say, all right, I'm going to actually dig into some of the calculations now that I can read it and it's not so frightening to me. And then the third time is you go through it and it's a similar kind of problems and the same things. And they have a chance of saying, okay, I can read it. I can do some of the problems. Maybe I can figure out why I can do the problems. And what is it about the math that is about the calculation that has, whether it's a strategy or what is the pattern I saw, like why can I do that calculation? So you can go ahead and just do flashcards and games for 6, 8 years and get kids that are really good at the grammar of math. Most people don't believe that because they think they have to have a textbook. So we've had the games and the flashcards. Now she's actually learning to read math, but she's just still a young person and it's only been 1 year. It's going to take some time. So I would test her in front of your husband and assess her at home doing the things you know she does know how to do. Ask her the questions that she's going to go, yeah, I can do that. Well, then you learned.
Mhm.
So I was just going to give you an analogy, Nicole, that might help. When my daughter first started dancing competitively, there was another young lady at the studio who had a solo and danced it beautifully and won first place at the national competition. And my daughter worked really, really hard and did well, but she didn't, right? She didn't win. And her, this other girl's dad happened to be an electrician and he was at our house helping us with something. And I said, wow, she did great. You know, you must be so proud. And he said, yeah, she did great. He said, but all she knows is that one dance. All she practiced was that one dance. She doesn't have any real skills that she could take and apply to another dance. He said, if she was going to learn another dance, she would have to learn it from the beginning, right? That, I mean, obviously there'd be something that carried over, but he said she didn't practice the basic steps. She didn't, right? There were all these things that she didn't know. Where my daughter was really, right. I mean, before she discovered that she actually liked performing, she just loved to be in the studio and practicing. And she would practice her bar work and she would practice the steps and she would really, the grammar of dance was where she was really happy in honing those skills so that then when she started to dance competitively, her teacher could take and say, okay, well, you already know how to do 10 things. We're going to put them together in this order, right? And she could dance 2 different solos because she knew she already had the grammar of dancing. And so now she was becoming dialectic in the arrangement of those pieces. Where this other girl, she didn't have the grammar of dance. So she just knew one thing. And so when you compare sometimes, I think a classical student who is putting that work into the grammar and the building blocks, sometimes it can look like for your daughter, it might look like students in her class are doing more math or they're better at math, or it looks like they're somewhere ahead of her on the journey, but they're not really. It's just that she's building this strong foundation. And you know, I drew this picture today. I'm going to draw it here. Let me find my um and, and Leigh, I hope this is accurate and I'm not going too far off of what I should say, but
Christy, I can't control you. You go wild.
Well,
but
that
I think
sounds very intriguing.
But
so
you
if
know,
you
but it's
think
kind of like
about
a
a
house that
student,
goes up too fast. And you're like, how'd that
well,
house go up so fast? Where's the foundation?
well, here's how, right? So a lot of traditional curricula do this, right? I learn something really fast and then I peak and I know it and I know it really well. I've prepared for the test, right? Even our CC students who've been using Saxon, right? They're still taking those tests and quizzes. So they're working really hard and they take this test and they do really well on the test. And then they move on to something else. And so that knowledge that they had for that
We can't
test,
see what you're drawing, by the way.
Oh, I can see it. It's in the top
Oh.
left corner.
Oh, okay.
Do you-
Maybe I think the people are just blocking it for me. Hold on, I'm sorry. Okay.
I just kind of drew it in the middle. So we kind of grow, right? It's sort of like this curve where we grow, we get our knowledge really fast and we peak, and then we move on to something else, and that knowledge just goes away. Where the classical method says, hey, we're going to build this really strong foundation. And so our curve may look a little bit different, but notice what happens. It may still peak and we may not always be at the peak of our, right? But I kind of stay with this steady piece of knowledge, of understanding that doesn't tail all the way off, right? And for a lot of students, may then actually lead to a second peak because they loved learning and they kept on going. So this part right here might feel like, oh my goodness, we're not doing something right because we haven't ramped up as fast as everybody else did. But right, we're going to be long term better. And so helping one, trusting that for us as parents, and then helping our students to trust that when they're comparing themselves to the world, is challenging. And just as a, little shout out to the classical method and to Cece, my daughter is a sophomore this year, and one of her honors classes, she had signed up to lead the class discussion on Hamlet. So she was familiar with Hamlet. She'd read Hamlet, um, so she was prepared on that side of things, but she thought it was at the end of the week, and it wasn't. It was the beginning of the week. It was Monday. So she woke up Monday morning and looked at the schedule and went, oh, I'm presenting today. And she was able to draw on those classical skills, right? Those common topics, and lead the conversation without having sat down and written it all out and prepared. She was able to jump in and lead that conversation not because she'd read Hamlet or because she'd done all these things in CC, right? It wasn't about the content of CC that had prepared her, but it was the learning skills. It was the conversation skills that had prepared her to be able to go and jump into the middle of this honors class in college and lead a conversation. And she said, yeah, Mom. She goes, it was really great afterwards. Everybody was like, oh, that was a great discussion. You did a great job. And she's like, Mom, it felt really good, but it was just pulling from that background that she had of knowing how to have a conversation. And so all those things that are true about classical education and the other strands are true in math as well. And so this
Hey,
year,
Nick. Let's
it
see.
may be next year before they really appreciate it. But I guarantee you in the fall, when your daughter sits down with monomials, she's going to go, I know this.
So I have a question for you, Nicole. Do you know more math than you did last year?
I surely do. I even understand what a function is. And I went through calculus and I never understood it. I just did the math. I just followed the formulas. But now I'm like, oh, and because I'm trying to explain it to a 13-year-old now, an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old. I'm breaking down like even the smallest things, and I'm like, I know what it is, but I don't know what it is. So yes.
So you might want to tell your fans and friends and family or your husband, it's not about how much our children are learning. It's about how much I'm learning, so that when they come and ask me a question or need a resource, boy, am I ready for them. And so this year was your year to learn the math.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I had to do a lot of work. And I confess, I'm hoping that the work lessens a little bit after I've gone through this a year or two, because this was hard.
Yeah. Oh, we have faith in you, Nicole. You'll be leading Math Map podcast in a year for us.
Oy vey.
So Leigh, before we jump into inviting people to share testimonies, I just wanted to address something that somebody asked about word problems. And I know you gave a really great answer, but I also wanted to point out that is a great place to use our storytelling skills and practice storytelling. So ask your child or your student to make up a problem, right? So if the calculation is just 2 + 3 = 5, well, can you tell me a story, right? What would be the beginning of the story? Well, the beginning of a story might be that there were 2 ducks sitting on the side of a pond. And then the action of the story might be that 3 more ducks flew in to have lunch with the first 2 ducks. And so then there was a problem because they weren't sure if they had enough cupcakes for all the ducks, right? And so that's my problem. So my resolution is that they counted the cupcakes and found out there were 5 cupcakes, and that's how many ducks there were. And so there was enough. And so now everybody lived happily ever after because there were 2 ducks and 3 ducks, and we had 5 ducks and 5 cupcakes, right? So I can make a word problem to fit that calculation. And that's a great way to practice storytelling with our students. and help them build the word problem. So then when they see problems written in words, right, they have that confidence because, well, I've done this before.
Can I tell a quick story about like how that's happened to us? So my youngest son loves donuts. I know all of us love donuts, but my youngest son has, I don't know, he just, can I get a donut like randomly? And so I said, if X is how many donuts you get to eat, and you get to say on a scale of 1 to 10, that's a 10. A donut, I get a donut, that's a 10, right? That's a function. Like the enter one donut, 10 is the Y. And then I said, if you get 2 donuts, he's like, that's an 11. And you get 3 donuts, that's a 12, and you're going up. So we talked about if I just stop there, that's kind of a line. Then I said, what if you eat 8 donuts? Then you start to feel bad. Then you kind of get, now it's like, now you're at like back down to an 11, right? And then you do 9 donuts. Now you're down to like an 8. And I said, that's diminishing returns. And so like just being able to put it in a story and talk about how the relationship between the donuts and the emotions, that's the function. And then now you can actually graph your emotions, so to speak, or your responses to how many donuts you ate. That was a really great way for us to start understanding functions. And it was because we could put it in a story and figure out what is this thing that we're calling functions. And then even diminishing returns, it was like, oh, okay, so you can put the same thing in, but you actually, or you can go the same amount, but you actually get a different response, a diminishing return. So even those stories have helped us to understand math better.
Well, that's great. Well, I really wanted to me be quiet for a few minutes and just open it up. And so if I think I mentioned it was Lee's birthday yesterday, so this is your chance to bless Leigh and bless others by just sharing any testimonies that you would like to share. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to play one testimony and then I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that people can see you if you are sharing a testimony, and then I can start sharing again at the end. So I'm going to share one.
I can't hear anything.
Yeah, it's muted, Kirsty.
Kirsty, when you share your screen with the testimony, before you hit the share button, there's a little drop down about sharing sound.
Sharing.
And you click.
Okay. Yes, thank you. I knew I needed to do that, and then I was rushing, and rushing never gets us where we need to be. So let me share one more time so you can hear Carrie's feedback. And
it was just really great. And I just said, hey, we're going to do this. And I modeled it and they did it. And it was beautiful. So
I'm so
to see that
sorry.
integration,
Start her over. There we go.
It was just, we were doing cartography and we got to Antarctica, and the weekly help suggested like using a compass to actually do the polar map of Antarctica. And this was the first year that I felt like I knew how to do that. The kids in the class knew how to do that, and we had the tools in our little math bag. So it was just really great. And I just said, hey, we're going to do this. And I modeled it and they did it. And it was beautiful. So to see that integration between the math and the cartography it was awesome. So I don't know if that's the kind of thing you're looking for, but it was a lovely, lovely moment. We were doing.
Carrie wasn't able to join us today because she was helping with mock trial, but she wanted to share that with everybody. So.
And what was the compass exercise that she was referring to for the math map?
It was in cartography, and it was doing polar coordinates, but in cartography. And so it was something that she'd always skipped before because she didn't really understand how to do that in the cartography segment and the cartography strand. And so she felt really equipped this year for the first time.
I think it was in her weekly helps, like the Challenge A weekly helps.
and she felt helped by the math map because of the polar coordinate.
Yes.
Oh.
Look, just holding that compass and being able to make circles is hard. And as an adult, I find that difficult. So like for week 14, when we do those constructions, who cares if you can do the math? Learn how to hold the compass and then fold the patty papers to do the math. It's easier.
All right. So please, if you would like to share something, please go ahead and speak. We would love to hear what you have to share today.
Well, I have a couple of tests. Settings.
We can't hear you, Becky.
Becky, your audio is not coming through very well. Maybe, I don't know if you can put it in the chat or try again one more time.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello? Okay, perfect. So I just wanted to share two quick testimonials, one on a community level and one on a personal level. I am a two director with my oldest, and I really wanted to find a way, especially with the Western cultural history, to bring in the exordia from the math map and just kind of try to pull Saxon problems from the lessons for that week that would kind of match and go along with the different domains or the different dimensions, excuse me. And I think it's been really, really meaningful, even for my challenge 2 kids who, I mean, at this point are proverbially just kind of picking up the scraps of math map from the rest of us. You know, their minds were blown as we're trying to integrate some of these concepts with art and math. And even I did reach out to Babs when we got to 3rd and 4th dimension, because I was like, whoa, you know, Saxon doesn't do a lot with the 3rd and 4th dimension. What do I do now? And she's like, well, Dr. Gilpin reminded me it's all layered, it's all complex. And so I was trying to explain that to the kids and they weren't getting it. And I was like, well, start with a circle. What happens when you start, you know, stacking those circles? And they're like, oh, you get a sphere. And it's like, well, the same thing with the calculations in those different dimensions. And I think their minds were blown and they're just using their imagination. And I use that not in the pejorative sense, in just really creative ways to think more transcendentally about math. At home, I have 3 different kids, 6, 10, and 12, that are doing 3 different levels of math map. And I really thought that was going to be a challenge. And I do have one right in the middle that's very differently abled. And so we reordered his pages. He looks at like 1, 5, 9, and 13 together because they're all the same patterns. And, you know, because I hear a lot of times, well, it doesn't work for my kid, but maybe it works for other kids. And I'm philosophically of the mind frame, like you can make anything work for any kid. So just in reordering those pages for my son, he was able to go through it this way, where my kids at home do it a different way. If one of them gets confused, they get with their younger sibling and they start looking at it together. And that's been fun. And so I think it's just been really meaningful to bring the family back together again at the table. And I just thank y'all for that. I thank y'all for this opportunity. I really think that God is working in our family. I've read so many math books this year and I just started the MA program. And so I was telling my husband, I said, I think my thesis is going to be on math and or quadrivium. So I'm just so excited. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Becky. That was great.
Thank you for the math map.
Oh, you're so welcome.
She wanted to meet you, Dr. Gilpin. When I first told her, we talked about who made the math map. I got to introduce her to Mrs. Borton's the other day, and I told her also there's Dr. Gilpin. So for a while, she talked about Mrs. Board and Dr. Penn, but then today she caught on to Dr. Gilpin. So she wanted to come see you and tell you thank you.
That's my brother Matthew massaging my mom.
Oh, that's nice. Is he a good brother?
He's 11. 11.
Wow. How old are you?
And my brother Nate is 12.
He's 13.
Wow.
Today is his birthday.
Today is He is 12 now.
13.
13.
So our 7th child is in challenge A and doing complex, and I'm directing his class. And then my 11-year-old behind me, but I know blurry, there you go, is doing fractions. And then our 8-year-old is doing naturals. And Lily Grace turns 6 when?
In 2 days.
In 2 days, she'll be 6, and she's been doing digits. And she loves it.
I love the math.
Yes, is Babs,
Oh.
Babs, you're on here, aren't you? So
Yes.
Babs, she's the one in the pictures.
Okay,
10 o'clock at night, bringing me the math map.
Gotcha.
This is her.
Is she the same one who wanted to take it to church?
Yes.
Okay, yes, she thought
Yeah.
it was part of the Bible. Yeah, great.
It does have scripture.
That's right. That's right.
The opinion of the math map that I hold, I'd rather not disclose because I'm not qualified to disclose that information.
Last night I did throw up.
Okay.
So,
Thank you. All right.
Unfortunately.
She ate something she shouldn't have last night. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. It was nice to meet you all.
the math
You want to
map.
speak real fast? All right. Lean forward or they can see you. Or you're blurry. Back up. There you go.
Yeah,
Thank you for
you're
the
not
math
on mute
map.
yet, Sarah Lynn.
Oh, I'm not.
It's the
Sorry.
area. It's
Yeah,
okay.
I was just, she wanted to say hi. Sorry.
Oh, fine. So I would like to ask Kristen if she's willing to. Kristen's been with me probably longer than anybody else on this screen. And so I know she's got a lot of experience in CC and with Saxon. What's your opinion? Because you've worked really hard this year on the math map, trying to understand it. So what do you think's the strengths and the weaknesses?
Well, I haven't been doing, I wish that I had done it more than I did this year, but I will tell you, as a Challenge 4 director, I'm in my 4th year of directing 4. My children are now 20, soon to be 21 and 19. We started when they were 2 and 4. So been here a long, long time, and I've so enjoyed looking at the first thing that I noticed was the charts. I said the charts, the blue, which is my year, which means I'm going to have to direct 4 until 2029 so that I can get 4 into my class. But I said the blue is gold because these charts are what I strived to do for years and years and years, and I failed miserably. These put everything together for me. That's what I tell everybody is the charts are what is worth the math map. They are so helpful no matter where you are. But I will also tell you that the surprise and the welcome surprise was the beginning with the invention and the Memoria pages, as I didn't understand why they were there initially. And as we've been discussing it and going through it on a weekly basis, I see the beauty of the invention and the Memoria and arrangement pages and how it fits into the classical model, how it fits into a biblical worldview, and how it can help with anything. I am so excited to use the math map when we use the new Calculus for Everyone physics book next year. I can't wait to see the integration that we'll be able to have. And even though my students won't be in the math map, I do use the art every week to introduce our math time. And that has been my students' favorite time of the day. They're like, oh, we get to do the art again. And sometimes they didn't. Like last week, we were accumulated change and they're like, I don't really like that one, but I really like these and these. And so they started telling me, what they were, because they're getting geared up for senior thesis now. But the math map has been a wonderful blessing. So I have been an encourager to our community so that they are not scared of it. And my even Challenge A director maybe 2 weeks ago said, I'm really excited now to understand the math map, but she has math questions at lunchtime from time to time too. So I want grandkids so that I can go through the math map with them. But my kids aren't quite there yet. So anyway, thank you, Leigh. Thank you, Kirsty, for everything, for all the math map team, for Babs, for Shauna, for Jill, for everybody. It's been a wonderful time just hanging out with you guys this year. So thank you. Oh,
Do you
Nina
have
asked a quick question. She said, how do I share the art with kids who don't have the booklet? I actually screenshotted every art piece and put it on a PowerPoint. And in our rooms, we are blessed in our facility to not only have a whiteboard, but a TV in the room. So I'm able to flash it up there with the quote and the devotion. So that's how they see it.
Well, and the beta versions have it too. So, I mean, families can download it. The beta versions have the art.
No, just print it. Okay, Karen, you had something to say.
Hi, Leigh, and hi, Dr. Gilpin and everyone. Happy belated birthday to you, Leigh. I just want to tell you guys, and by the way, I haven't been able to get on live this whole year, but I've been watching a lot of the recordings. But Leigh, I remember sitting across from you at Mimi's Cafe in Ontario, California, like, I don't know, 8, 10 years ago, when you first brought MathMap to us. And I've been serving as a SR for 7 years. I just want to tell you guys what a joy it's been. I have loved math all my life because I was good at it. I could do the math, but it wasn't until the math map that I got to see the cohesive whole. And it's one of those things that there were so many days I would do the art piece and devotion, and I would want to get on my soapbox and send it to people, homeschooling friends or not, because you guys have allowed me to see. I tell our community, it's kind of like come to CC for the first time and realize the impact of learning a timeline. And you guys have done it with a math map. So I just thank you from the bottom of my heart. And like some of you guys have reflected, our community as a whole has been struggling with it. And so I actually have pretty much tutored every level and directed a lot of the challenge levels too. And I just finished a couple of years of challenge 4. And I thought I'd take a break this past year. And I know our first class of Challenge A has really, first class using math has really struggled. So the Lord's brought me back to want to step back into Challenge B next year because I see such opportunity and potential here. And I would like everyone to have a chance to get that cohesive whole. But I want to let you know that my 2 challenge, well, my kids have graduated, a couple of them graduated and 2 are in college. And they come back and they see our 12-year-old in the math map and they wish they had done this. And they're excelling in sciences and mathematics in college, but they wish they had this holistic view. And more importantly, just to be able to see Christ in so many aspects that you guys have pointed out. So I just want to encourage everyone, let's keep on just diving in and be good learners ourselves and trusting the Lord to have used you guys, this incredible team, to bring something that is revolutionary and that is only just reveal so much more of his grandeur. So I have a class of 10 coming up from my daughter's Challenge A class. Only 2 or 3 are doing this regularly. A couple are doing a few pages, and some parents who are still keeping their kids in Saxon said, well, one of them at least, they said, well, Audrey only supposed to do like, 1, 5, 9, 13, but then she manages to somehow finish it and doesn't complain about it. So I have a lot of hope. I think we just need to keep that curious mind and be willing to observe and attend to it, and let the Lord just allow us to reap this great harvest. So I tell the kids already, didn't do any family interviews. I get up and dance some of those days. So just seeing the unseen previously. So thank you guys. I really appreciate all you've done.
Thank you.
Man, I really got to figure out how to get this fire over here in our community because I see the beauty and I see it and I'm so excited about it. And like even this morning, I did an intro to the math map for some folks who are jumping in, and there it was a lot of complaining. It was very much like this, my son's going into he's a very math-minded person. He's going into math, and I just don't see how this is going to do that. And I'm just so I'm so ready to fast forward 6 years in a way, right? And just be like, let's watch what happens to those of us in the math map. But I also am like, really, my heart wants to hey, just give it a shot, just try it, just do one page a day. I just want to get that fire that I'm seeing from you guys into our communities here in North Georgia. So we'll be praying for that for all of us who are struggling with folks who just don't see it. They haven't caught the vision yet.
So, we don't expect people to just fall in love with math just because we wrote a curriculum. right? So it doesn't matter how we wrote it, or if we brought in a whole new one, Raise Math or some Singapore or whatever, we still would have had the same attitude where it's sounding like about 1 out of 7 are enjoying the curriculum and the other 6 aren't. And I knew that. But what's so great about you guys and why we started with the Challenge A is we have the resources to help the adults in the room learn the math first. Then the students will come along. And that's why I asked the question of Nicole earlier. And so I appreciate those of you who continue to tutor, because you're never going to have all children at the same level in anything when they show up to seminar with you. So what we can do now, because we own the math map, is we can train however, whenever, in whatever way our team needs us to work with them, which we could not do when someone else owned the copyright. So I appreciate that the struggles here this year, if you can each maybe, instead of trying to worry about your students learning it, if you would, as a tutor, director, parent, worry about you learning it, like I referred to earlier, the children will come along. But if they can't get it modeled by somebody they respect, it is more difficult. And so we're probably on a 5 to 6 year trajectory till we start having half the class maybe saying, I really like it. But here's what I'm also seeing. If it's challenge 3 or 4, and maybe Jill could speak to this, the challenge 3 and 4 students are starting to see exactly why we're doing what we're doing. It's the ones that just want rote workbooks in that middle school years that are going to struggle for longer because they don't have the maturity to, compare to something else.
That is absolutely true. And the other thing is that students who have been in Challenge 3 and Challenge 4 have used other math curriculums that did not provide charts, that did not tie things together, and that did not even touch on the idea of dimensions. And so when they have done higher math and they open these books, it is like Kristen said, it is that gold mine of just, oh my goodness, all this is here. This is, and was it Karen who also said, like, your students who are in college and they see this and think, I wish I had it. And it's so interesting. That's how it is with so many things, like even salvation. So many people, they might think, oh, I'll get around to it. I'll get around to it. But people who lived hard and got, drug through the mire, and then they get saved as an adult, they think, oh, I wish I'd done this when I was young. So sometimes when you see the value of something, it's because you've done hard things without it. You've done hard math without the charts. You've lived hard without Jesus. Whatever it is that you've done hard, when you find the answer to it is when there's value. And sometimes when you grow up with it and you haven't really had to do the hard thing without it yet, it might be a little harder to see how good this actually is.
I know that Juliet wants to share something, so I was just going to share one thought as I listened to you, Nicole, is I am excited to see what happens next year when people who made it through this year, but maybe it was a struggle, start over with booklet 1 and booklet 2 and go, oh, this isn't as hard as I remember it. I'm excited for that experience, and for other people to see that experience and go, what do you mean it's easier this year? Right? Because that's the classical way. And so I'm looking forward to that. And the other thing that I would say is I don't have hard and fast numbers. We haven't gone out and really done this, but I think that Babs and Shauna would back me up on this. The people who struggle and the people who complain are people who gave up. They didn't finish the year. They stopped using the math map before they saw the beauty. The people who continued through till now are still, right? We get tutors that are like, okay, this is really hard and I'm not seeing this. But they go, oh, but this has happened and I saw this, right? The testimonies are coming out of the people who stuck with it, and they're beautiful testimonies. They're not just like, oh, it was okay, but they're like, my life has changed kind of testimonies. And I think that's really encouraging, right? That we see that if you stick with this, right, that you don't just get a little return, you're getting a big return. But now I want to turn it over to Juliet.
Hi, ladies and Leigh. And
I'm just really excited that I could be on here because I don't go on the book clubs. I'm 3 weeks behind you guys, and it didn't feel like it would be worthwhile for me to do the live book clubs. But I'm doing 27 this week. But I thought, oh, this is 30. I better go live this week. And I super appreciate all of the ideas for a blue book. I just copied and pasted them real quick into a file to look at later. I wanted to share that. I am one of those strugglers and I've complained and I've done all the things, but I have persevered and I am doing Challenge A again next year. So I'm expecting that the program is going to get more fun for me next year. And what I decided to do this year, kind of late into the year, is start fractions with my Rising Challenge A daughter. And so I just printed them all out. And something happened yesterday or 2 days ago, which is exactly what probably should have happened. She was doing one of her lesson pages and it was like a copy thing or a trace or like follow this pattern. She just did it. And I was like, wait a minute, wait. I don't get this. Wait, I don't understand this. It was the closure law one. And she's like, well, I just did what I was supposed to do. So I get on like the help desk and I'm like asking questions and I'm trying to figure it out. And I realized that what she did as a math map student was perfectly logical for her not to have to understand everything about it. She just followed the pattern. And that was beautiful. And I realized I also can do that and not have to understand everything right now and follow the pattern. And maybe in 2 years, I'm really going to understand it, but maybe it's not going to be this year. And yeah, so I just felt like that was good and kind of eye-opening to me. And that's actually happened a couple of times in the last 6 books that we've done. So gonna keep going with it. And I love what Leigh said today about flashcards and games. And I want to play more games with my students too, in every area, honestly. Like, I don't know. I'm too serious. So thank you. I'm already figuring out some games we can play on Friday that we don't normally play. Not even for math, like for
Yeah. Thanks, Juliet. And thank you. Like, Juliet's a great example of a tutor who's putting in the hard work, who's showing up to the help desk and really taking advantage of the resources that Leigh and Cece, Robert, they've invested not just in that printed curriculum that you hold in your hand, but they have invested in a whole team of support that are here for you. When Leigh said we can support this because we own the copyright, like that really, when Leigh and I first sat down, that was the heart behind CC having its own math curriculum. The heart was, I want to be able to support this. And we can't support Saxon. We can't support any other math curriculum because we don't own it. And so that has always been Leigh's heart, was a desire to be able to support this for you. And the resources that they've committed to that, I just think, I don't think there's any other program out there that's committed the support resources that CC has. And so a huge thank you to Leigh and to Robert for that commitment. And a huge thank you to the tutors who are taking advantage of that so that they can lead their families well.
As I hear these comments and things that are being stated, it takes me back to 2008 when I started with 13 students on the coast of Georgia, and that's all we had. But we followed the process, we followed the outline for foundations, and they came. I mean, we had the next year we didn't know where we were going to put everybody because we needed more room because people saw that. And I hear that I wish I had started this sooner. I wish I had seen this sooner. And I think that that's what's going to happen with the math map as it gets, now we're going to have A's and B's that are using it on a regular basis. And I hear the same things that I've heard back a long time ago about CC. I wish I would have done it sooner. I wish I would have heard it sooner. And I think that that's where the math map is. And I think it's only going to get better. And I'm excited to hear what the book club is going to be for next year too. So thank you again.
Thank you. I certainly do not want to miss any testimonies. Are there
I was going to share. I'm not tutoring I don't have I don't have any more kids to put through the math map all the way, but I'm doing it with my B student and constantly I'm not doing that very well, but I think just the underlying theme of seeing the unseen has just changed how I'm viewing everything. And I was in the same community for over 10 years and then with those people, and then we moved this year. And so trying to step into leadership, meeting new people, and just the grace that it allows that what I see is not all there is, whether it's in math, whether it's in relationships, whether it's what God is doing in my own heart. And I think that's really what has happened for me. And then coming here every week I don't even really have a position to encourage the other parents yet in my community, but I have been encouraged by being here and just realizing like God is doing all these things that we cannot see. Some of it is in math, but there's a lot in this world besides just math, and so just trying to peel my eyes, like what are you doing? What's going on? What's going on in this other person that I feel like just lashed out at me? Like I can't see it, and just living in that space.
That's beautiful. Thank you. So I just wanted to show you a summer version of the Logic Catechism, that even once you finish with lesson 30, you don't have to finish with the math map. So I just wanted to give you some ideas, right? So the solutions, if you haven't noticed, there's 4 pages on one page in the solution. So if you want something that's a quick reference to review over the summer, all you need, right, are those pages you pulled out in the middle. Everything you need's there, and you could pick some problems off there, some discussion points off there to discuss with your student. So there's a really handy reference.
I want to give another tip for using it. Just keep them in the car like workbooks or scrapbooks. And if your children literally just write on top of what's there, that will continue to get the notations and the language in their head, as well as how the maps laid out.
Notice that our inside the back cover, right? All those questions, all of those I Spy games, right? Keep that going. There's a great way to keep that math conversation going over the break. Right, the back cover, those games, they're still fun over the summer. You can use those careful calculations pages. You can go back and pull some of those out if you want calculation review over the summer. Notice the flashcards, keep those up so that we're keeping that grammar before us, continuing to develop that ability to read math. The companion, right? Notice I changed this one also, so parents can explore other domains and dive deeper. We know that when you're in the trenches with your student each week, you may be just looking at, hey, I just need this answer, or I'm just looking at the solutions for the careful calculations. And we just want to encourage you to take some time to explore what the companion has. And so in May, Babs and Shauna are actually going to lead a tour on one of our book clubs after everybody's finished, right? We don't want to distract you. So after everybody's finished for the year, they're going to give you a tour of what you may have missed in the companion. And then I added that word incomplete because we know that a lot of you maybe didn't complete every lesson page. And guess what? Those are a great resource for summer work, right? Pull some of those pages out and give them to your students just to work on over the summer. We are excited, right? And when I say we, I mean me and all of my CC friends are really excited because we know that in years prior, you would get to week 30 and everything else would be done except for logic, because that just kind of went and went and went. And hopefully you were going to finish before you started the next year. And so it is so nice now that you get to week 30 and your year is complete. It is perfect. I love the fact that perfect mean complete, right? So you can have a perfect year, you can have a complete year. But that doesn't mean we want the conversation or the practice to necessarily stop over the summer. We know that students who continue to practice those ideas over the summer are going to come back and be stronger students in the fall. And so these are some ways you can use the resources that you have at hand, not necessarily to keep um, doing the same thing as you have been, but to work with that break to give your students rest while still reviewing and practicing and keeping those ideas fresh over the summer. So that is all I have. But if there are any other testimonies that you have, or if anybody has math questions that they would like me to answer before I jump off, the time is yours.
I have a math question, if that's okay. If that's really okay.
Yes.
I'm looking at week 26 accumulated change, and the one question that seems to keep stumping me is the left, middle, right language. And when would you ever graph it on the left or in the middle? Because I've only ever seen it graphed on the right. Can you help me with that?
Sure. So I'm going to go to a different screen. All right. Do you see a blank screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not going to give you a really great answer in terms of when would you use which one, except that it depends on the graph shape. There are going to be occasions where we're not able to integrate a function. And those are usually going to be odd functions, but we can always use a Riemann sum. And it is not, when people are using Riemann sums sort of professionally or in the world of academia, they're usually using some kind of a computer to help generate that. They're not necessarily doing it by hand. But we can do it by hand because it helps us to understand the integral and how the integral is derived. I hate using that word derived, but calculated may be better. So generally speaking, right, if this is my curve, and if I draw my rectangles and I use the rightmost point, right, it's going to be about the same as if I was to draw that and use a different color. The left hand, right? So if I was using the left here, it would be this, the red. And what we're going to see is that the midpoint is going to really be an average. So most often you would probably use that average. This is just that pointing ahead again to how do we understand the integral? How do we understand this accumulation of area? There may be cases if I'm trying to think when one might be better than another, but I don't know.
Is it more dependent on the function and how it's being drawn? So you can just see it.
Really is. And again, it's what's going to drive it more. The accuracy is going to come more from having a narrower rectangle than whether I chose the left, the right, or the middle.
That part I think I understood. I just was like, when would you ever use the middle or the right? I've never thought of that before.
So if you get in the older grades, there'll be comparative between them more, and you might be able to see why it works better on some functions than others.
Oh.
That's the problem with the whole book not being released, but we're getting there. We have a whole bunch coming out June 1st, so, digitally as well as more this week.
Well, I do. One other question that someone asked me to ask you guys is the Kelfor calculations solutions being only in the companion. One of the people I spoke to said she has a really hard time with her internet, and so she's stuck. Are you guys? Is it okay to print them? I mean, I guess people can screenshot them, but is there like a solutions packet that may be coming down the pike?
Well, write it as a note. Think about it. Yeah, because right now there's not that many people even using the curriculum compared to when it's all out. So I haven't heard that before. Kirsty or Babs, have you guys heard that? Shauna? Yeah. What are you telling them, Babs?
I just tell them that no, it's not planned for right now. We can pass along their feedback. But I do know some people are trying to do screenshots, and in order to do that. I haven't heard the internet issue, but I think the issue that I hear is that they just don't want to get on the computer. They want to just use the printed booklet. So, yeah.
And
And
they were,
Nicole,
I've had like 4 people ask me over the course of the last 2 weeks that I've been doing the math map and intro to the math map, like, why are the solutions to everything else in here, but not the careful calculations one? And my answer has been along the lines of it's kind of meant to be used more as an exam, or a quiz or something, or practice, as opposed to the solutions. You can go to them and work backwards, but this one is kind of to see, did you get it right? So that's kind of how I justified it. But someone suggested, just like in other curriculum, you may have to buy a solutions packet. Like, would it be okay if we get like a solutions packet, or even a PDF that we could download? We could buy it for a few dollars and download it, so we could just have the answers to the careful calculations available.
Great question. We'll think about it. It's a good idea.
And along with that, I've had a lot of parents ask about the charts. If there could be like a packet of the charts similar to how we have our essentials trivium tables. They would love to have a resource like that. And yeah, we talk through the reason why they're in every booklet, but they also would love to have a place where they have all the charts. So I don't know if that's been given us feedback or not.
Well, I can tell you why that probably won't happen for a while. There's math reasons, but logistically, people say they want that. But once they've had the same curriculum 2 or 3 years and have lots of sets of the charts already, I doubt they're going to spend money on more. So, so we're waiting to just go through a few more years of the math map to see how the older students are using them and what their need is in charts. But for now, everybody has them. They can just rip them out and put them in a 3-ring binder. So
Yes,
people
and that's
say
what
they
I
want
do.
one thing, but they tend to not spend money on what they say.
That's
So
very true.
we'll see. Versus there's another idea we have for the charts and some of these other issues, or not issues, but parts, where we may be releasing a different compendium. So keep giving us these ideas and we'll see how they're actually being used before we spend money creating something that people just aren't using.
Well, my people have been saying if you sell the charts, we can just buy them one time, and then maybe we can decrease the cost of the actual math map.
That will never happen. You can tell them that won't happen.
Yeah, and the vision for that, I mean, I still love the fact that when, in those early days when Leigh and I would sit and talk, that Leigh's vision really was, wouldn't it be great if 2 things, students didn't have to carry around a great big thick textbook that in and of itself is intimidating, and 2, if these families that are always on the go could just say, okay, hey, I just need to grab 1 booklet or 2 booklets, and everything I need is in that booklet. And so I don't have to, right? We're like this morning, I ended up having to take my mom to the doctor's, which is why I was rushing in at the last minute. And she had to have an infusion, right? So had my children still being young and they went with me, I could have just been like, I'm just going to grab that booklet and everything you need is in that booklet. Your charts are in there, your solutions are in there. I know it. So all we have to do, and we could sit there at the doctor's office and have our math lesson. And that was exactly the scenario that Leigh described when she said, this is really what I want to do. I really want to do this for these families that are on the go. And that's, I'm just going to say this because I appreciate the families and the moms who are trying to be helpful. Last summer, when I saw people making YouTube videos telling you how to use a curriculum that they'd never used themselves, it broke my heart because they didn't know what the vision was. They didn't know, right? So when you hear Leigh's vision for, oh my goodness, we've got to run out the door, grab this booklet and everything I need is in it. I can't do that if I tore my curriculum apart and put it into 10 different binders, right? And
Yes.
and so I really just want to share that when when you go back, and that was Lee's part, there's like these families are always on the go, and I want this to be a resource that is easy for them to take. That's why the charts are in the booklets. That's why the solutions are in the booklets, right? So that that mom has everything she needs right there for that week.
Yeah, we could have done it. I mean, I know that I know how to count pages and money. I could have done it right from the beginning, had the charts out. But then I would know how many parents would be on the go and would say, oh, I don't have the charts with me. I don't want to lose them. So I left them at home. So now I can't really help explain this to you. So either way, there's a difficulty. So we went with the we went with the student and the parent who's just busy and needs to have things in little bites rather than the whole big picture. Because you can make the whole big picture on your own at home and stick it in a binder.
I love that my students can write on the charts and they're gonna get a clean one the next year. And if I lose it, I'm gonna get a clean one the next year. I love knowing that it's coming back around again and I don't have to, they can actually use them, which is great.
Yeah, and that's good testimony because Jill's been tutoring for what, 4 years now, the math map. So you've gotten to see things, 5 years. All right.
That's beautiful. And I was gonna say, I love that you said it. I say it this way: you can't win for losing, right? Like there's so many different ways you can do it, and you know, you're gonna lose something anyway. Some weeks you need to look back at a previous chart. Well, it's nice to have that you can you have popped it out and put it in a little binder, and now you have yours that you can go on the go. But you can't win. Like something's gonna happen. Something's got to give. So I love that. That's just like part of our thinking. We're like, I'm gonna pick the best scenario that I can think of.
Well, and I will say that with the math map, I have a friend who her youngest, that was part of my 13 when I first started way back when. Her youngest is now challenge 4. He's going into an engineering / math something or other. He loves math. And I said, I know he's not going to have the math map in his class in challenge 4, but buy complex or monomials and get the charts. And it's well worth it to buy 1 year's worth, and the charts are worth it. The charts are worth it. So
thanks. Okay, well, it's 2:30. I need to go.
Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate you all being here. Thank you for your willingness to share. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week and just playing some games.
They're logging off.
Bye.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Bye.
Yes, happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Bye.
Oh, yeah, but hold on, I don't know how to log off. But hold on.
Oh.